Bom dia a todos, bom dia a todas. Reunidos aqui, graças ao Miguel Marques, que é um velho amigo, foi sócio da PwC, onde se engajou no tema da economia do mar, e graças ao Miguel e com o empenho da Fundação, já faz 5 anos, não é, Miguel? Que nós anualmente realizamos eventos, pelo menos uma vez por ano, que tem a ver com, digamos, esse tema genérico da economia do mar, mas é muito mais do que isso. A dimensão econômica é uma dimensão importante, não é a única. Nossa intenção sempre foi integrar o tema da economia ao tema do meio ambiente e da sustentabilidade da vida marinha. Esta década é a década dos oceanos, assim declarada pelas Nações Unidas, né? E este é o primeiro ano da década dos oceanos. E Miguel e eu tomamos a decisão de que seria muito oportuno fazer um evento que dissesse respeito a este que é um dos cruciais life supporting systems do nosso planeta. Life Supporting System que está sob ameaça, sob forte estresse. Para conhecer este problema, nós precisamos reunir cientistas. Este é o tema, assim como todos os temas complexos, que não são temas que se prestam a uma discussão simplória. E nós reunimos aqui 3 pessoas da mais alta qualidade, uma pessoa vinda dos Estados Unidos, outra da Índia, e Bruna, brasileira, que nos fala diretamente do Pará, das cercanias de Belém. Eu não vou me alongar aqui, eu queria apenas pedir licença, antes de passar a palavra ao Miguel, que vai ser o capitão do navio, queria pedir 1 minuto de atenção para mostrar as logomarcas das empresas que apoiam a programação anual de seminários da Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso, empresas essas sem as quais não seria possível realizar a série de eventos que a Fundação vem realizando. Eu queria agradecer sinceramente a cada uma delas por este apoio e, por fim, lembrar de que este tema do oceano é um tema que permanecerá entre nós nos próximos anos, né? Este é um acordo que já fizemos aqui com o Miguel e também com os participantes, que este não será one-time event, é um tema de grande importância e é um tema sobre o qual ainda há um déficit de conhecimento no Brasil. Queria lembrar também que este é o primeiro encontro que diz respeito a temas que estarão, de alguma maneira, em pauta em Glasgow, na COP26. Nós estamos nos aproximando deste evento importante, mudança climática tem se acelerado, o oceano é um sequestrador importante de carbono, a nossa cabeça já está em Glasgow e nós vamos dar consequência prática a isso. Já depois de amanhã haverá um novo seminário com Isabela Teixeira, ex-ministra do Meio Ambiente, e Eduardo Viola, professor de Relações Internacionais, especializado no tema de mudança climática, sobre a COP23. Eu termino por aqui, passando a palavra ao Miguel e, mais uma vez, agradecendo pela sua imensa colaboração. Miguel, a palavra é sua.
É um gosto estar aqui novamente na Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Eu gostaria de começar por dizer que a última vez que estive no Brasil, há quase 2 anos, foi quando se decretou a pandemia e estava precisamente na Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso e por isso é com maior agrado ainda que encontro o Sérgio aqui pela frente e muitos dos palestrantes que cá estão, pessoas dos Estados Unidos, da Índia, obviamente a Bruna do Brasil, países que muito sofreram com a pandemia e agora estamos levantando a cabeça, esperando que haja aqui uma recuperação grande e, por que não, que essa recuperação também se faça através do mar, do oceano, num momento em que estamos a celebrar o primeiro ano da década dos oceanos e num momento que antecede a COP que acontecerá em Glasgow. esta primeira saudação quis fazê-la em inglês, em português, mas agora mudarei para inglês por cortesia com os nossos palestrantes que estão aqui de língua inglesa. So, welcome to all. So it's with great pleasure that Frank, Bhakti, and Bruna accepted to be here today to share with all of you important insights about the ocean. So they will have some 10 minutes to start to give their talk. But I would like to say some words about Bhakti, which has a fantastic experience, not only in India, but in Australia too. So with her experience, we have one side of the world, from Australia to India, which is huge, as you know, with the Indic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Antarctic Ocean. And she's a bright woman that studied engineering to help us to better manage the water we use at our homes. So her talk will be very, very important because, as you know, all the water that exists in the ocean comes from land and from rain and from rivers. And so we should be more aware of what we do on our daily life to have better oceans through a better management of our fresh waters. Then we will have Frank E. Muller-Karger, which is based now in Florida, United States, and almost all his life he's been observing a lot of the oceanography, but with a biological aspect. So he's a biological oceanographer, and he knows a lot about the Atlantic, particularly the impact of the Amazon River on oceans. So I'm very interested to understand better about the ocean nearby, Amazon River, through the eye of Frank. And as we are talking about Amazons, we have Bruna in the middle of the Amazons, and so with a strong experience from the field of what is going now in the Amazon, and how can we better nurture our communities for a sustainable practice. So we will learn a lot with Bruna. So with no more delays, and thank you again to Sergio to welcome us, I will ask Bhakti to start with a very, very interesting talk about inland waters, fresh waters, how can we behave better when we use water.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Sergio, for giving me this opportunity to talk about a very important topic, which is requiring urgent attention and urgent action from one and all, not just experts, but from every one of us, because water touches all of us. And therefore, it is very important that we understand the problem and we also try and see what is it that we can do from our side. So that's why it's a unique opportunity. Thank you for that. So, the whole topic of ocean marine pollution takes me back to the time when I was helping city of Sydney in Australia. And if you see the map of Sydney city, one of the parts of Sydney actually drains into Sydney Harbour. And the Sydney Harbour is part of the Pacific Ocean. So the quality of water in the harbour was very important that we protect it and we keep it clean. So I initiated a discussion amongst all the city catchments who drain into Sydney Harbour, because if we want to keep the ocean clean, the action has to start at the source where the problem is. So we called it the Sydney Harbour Catchment Water Quality Improvement Program. And it is these type of actions we have to start taking by understanding the connection of the land and the rivers that drain. So the land drains into the rivers drain into the ocean, and all that we do at our end ends up finally in the ocean. And although the old thinking was, just, once it is out of your mind, out of your sight, and it is now out of your mind. But it is not so, because the pollution has been gathering at such a large proportion that we are going to get, a backlash. And the backlash will be very severe, that it will be irreversible. So I think it's a very good opportunity this forum has provided for us to reflect on what is the condition of the marine pollution, because it is a subject that we don't get to see visibly, and we also don't get to hear about so much in the headlines, because oceans are hard to study. And we are fortunate that we have gathered people who have studied the oceans. And unless we understand what is happening at the ocean level, we will not appreciate the problems that we are causing, the severity of the problems that we are causing on the land by our action, which is damaging the ocean marine life. So I think that is how I would like to set the context of our discussion, that the whole idea of understanding marine pollution is to really appreciate the severity of the impact of our actions sitting wherever we may be in any part of the world. Ultimately, it ends up in ocean, and ocean has been very kind because it's huge and generous, but we cannot stretch its generosity. And we are almost stretching its generosity right now. So we must take urgent action by understanding it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhakti, so much. And before I pass to Frank, I would like just to ask you a little bit about India. I know that you are really in the inland India, protecting the waters that flow to the Indic Ocean. So can you give us a little bit of insights of how is life there?
Sure. You're talking about me, myself?
Yes, about yourself,
yes.
And what
in
you are
India.
doing in India, your fantastic work there.
Absolutely. So, as I said, my work is more focused upon how can we make community members more and more literate, water literate, so that the water literacy can translate into a behavior change, into a mindset change. And so it is very important to understand and acknowledge that right now the state of water literacy is very, very poor amongst most people around the world. And it is not the fault of the individuals, but it is as a result of the water system that we have created around the world, which has been designed for efficiency to keep us very safe and secure and, without having any worry. And that has resulted in a negative consequence, which is not intended, but unintended negative consequence, where we as water users have become disconnected with the water system as well as the natural water cycle. So most of us, especially living in the cities, we don't really understand how water works in the nature as well as in the engineered system that we are customers of. So therefore, we only know water from the tap, that, we work with the water coming out of the tap. We don't need to know what happens before, how it arrives in the tap. We don't need to know what happens after we use the water from the tap. And that is where the problem lies. If we start to really engage and understand it in a way that'll help us understand why does the water companies need our help now? Because the system has become so large because of the population demand that it is not possible for the individual authorities to solve the problem until the community starts to participate. So what work I'm doing in India is about really understanding how the community is looking at water, how the community is facing the challenge, how they see the challenge, and then develop some tools to help them deal with the challenge themselves, to empower them so that they are able to take charge of the water problem that they are facing at their own boundary. because the beautiful thing with water is that it is actually best handled at a small scale. And if each of us took responsibility for the water that we are having within the boundary that we live, and it is possible, and that is what our organization actually teaches and gives them tools to use and to make sense of water that they are surrounded with, and to know how can we manage all the water that we have within our control and actually become water self-sufficient without putting the burden on the larger system, and also how we can actually become a solution to the problem rather than become part of the problem. So this is, we do by continuously talking to the community, developing the tools and making it available to them. So this is the work that I've been doing in the cities. And also recently I have been working in the villages. In the villages, people have some understanding of the natural water cycle because they are dealing with nature more than the city dwellers are, but they also are not understanding the science of groundwater, for example, because many of the rural village areas in India are dependent on groundwater, on how best they can capture groundwater by doing the right modifications to the land. And because they don't understand the relationship between the water that they see on the surface with the groundwater, they actually only stay focused on the surface water and lose sight of how does the groundwater and surface water are connected. And so our role in the rural areas is to help them understand the connection and make sure that whatever actions they're doing is connecting the surface water to the groundwater through the natural water cycle elements of the vegetation, of the soil. How can they manage the vegetation and the soil in a way that the groundwater is becoming sustainable, and also the pollution we are not contributing. So this is the work that we do, I'm doing with my organization, with my NGO in India.
Thank you so much, Bhakti. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. I could be all day learning with you, and we didn't tackle yet the importance of women on the process. And I know you, Bhakti, you also lead the wiki, which in India, the role of women is very, very important, as in all over the world. But we will have some time to speak about that. And then, so the main idea of the first talk being Bhakti is to understand how important individual acts inland are to affect ocean. And if we have in mind the Amazon River, we will notice how the hydrographic inland affects the ocean. And I think there is no one better than Frank to talk about us, because it is more than 30 years to look to that part of ocean, that fantastic river. And I think, I'm not sure, but Frank brings us some satellite images of it. So Frank, if you don't mind.
I'm going to talk about a number of things, maybe at a little bigger scale than local, but I think that Bhakti's message of whatever we do at the local level has a big impact in the region, but also what we're starting to learn, and we're more aware every day, is that global changes like climate change, including warming, the change in the chemistry of the ocean, affect life in the sea, and that has a very local signal. So global changes affect what we see locally, and understanding those changes is much what I try to do. So I'm going to give you that message that local actors is important, but we try to use the networking that is available through the United Nations, and also something called the Group on Earth Observations, or GEO, to try to bring people together. And so that's the number of acronyms that you have here on the bottom. These are groups that I work with in trying to organize something for the Decade of the Oceans that we call Marine Life 2030. And so this some of the partners are the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, Global Ocean Observing System, and so on. So this is groups of people that I invite you to participate in. Please join Marine Life 2030 and the decade as we go forward. And I'm talking seriously. Contact me, please, or contact me through Miguel so that we can work together. And I think Brazil has a big role to play here. So I think that we have a general idea of the dependence that we have on the ocean. In many ways, we fish, we have recreation in the sea. Most of the goods that we transport that come to us via the ocean globally. But there's also a big industry in terms of energy, pharmaceuticals, materials that connect society to the ocean. And yet that connection is not something that we think about every day. And I think Bhakti had a very good message that whatever we do inland is going to affect coastal areas and the very resources that we live with, and a lot of that comes through pollution. So we need to be conscious about the impacts that we have as we do things. So we sometimes call the inland economy a green economy because we're trying to make it more efficient, and we call the ocean economy a blue economy, and the two things are not separate. The ocean economy is estimated to grow up to $3 trillion globally by 2030. This is a very, very big number, and it affects over 1 billion people just depending on protein for food around the world. Many, many jobs, 350 million jobs around the world are connected to this blue economy. And yet, a lot of these jobs in the economy depend on life in the sea. We don't really think about this every day, but it's not just fisheries and tourism, but all the medicines that we can get out of the ocean depend on healthy biodiversity. And as the ocean changes because of sea level warming, chemistry, as the number of storms increases, as we pollute, we are seeing changes in the life in the sea. And so since we depend, so what we call ecosystem services depend on life in the sea, we need to understand how those depend on life, and we don't. So one of the things that we have is we know that there's at least named species. We have about 200,000 species in the sea now, but we think that there's 5 times more species that we have not described. So an issue is that we don't have good measurements of the ocean, especially in biology. There's not enough data. And this is where I think that if we want to inform the economy and make the right decisions to grow the economy in a sustainable way, that in a way that conserves and sustains the ecosystems that we depend on, we need to do that based on information. And the information that we have right now is very poor. Here's an example of the globe. And I think that both Miguel and Bhakti said, the ocean is very big. And we typically don't think about that. The ocean covers over 70% of the surface of the planet, and it represents over 90% of the space that living things have to live on Earth. That's the ocean. And yet, if you look at this picture, you see the continents in gray, and these are the number of records that you would find in public databases like OBIS about life in the sea, and most of it is empty. So we don't have good measurements of what is in the sea. And so we're thinking about an ocean that is changing, a planet that is changing because of climate change or because of our direct actions. And yet we cannot measure that change. So imagine if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, I can only look at your information of 50 years ago. We don't know how you're changing right now. It is impossible that way to make a diagnosis and make management decisions. So today we have these types of tools to measure things in the water. We have little robots, some go with sails, some you attach to fish. We have now new molecular methods that we call environmental DNA. We put things on buoys and on ships and on things that we lower through the ocean with cables. And yet every one of those makes point measurements in a huge ocean. So to make a global map is very difficult. And most of these things measure temperature or salinity or some chemical variable. Very few of them measure biology. And this is, for us, we are living things. We depend on living things in the ocean. So that making those measurements is very difficult. And what we would like to get are pictures like this on a daily basis, where we can sort of take the pulse of the planet. And we do that with satellites, but satellites have limitations also. Satellites look at the surface of the ocean, but they can tell us a lot about what's going on. Here, for example, we have a picture of what is the vegetation of the world on land and in the ocean. The green and yellow and red things in the ocean are areas where we have either more turbidity or because of river input, or we also have a phytoplankton bloom. So vegetation in the ocean that is the source of all food for everything. And you see interesting patterns here. I'm not going to get into those, but our planet has very interesting patterns like other planets do. And here we can see them from space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Miguel suggested, that the connection between the continent and the Atlantic through the Amazon in that red box. So many years ago, about 30 years ago, when these first satellite pictures became available to use more widely, we were just learning how to use these cameras in space. We made these pictures of how the Amazon water reaches the ocean and where it goes. And so there typically, and I'm going to say this very simplistically, two seasons in the tropics. One here we have sort of January through June in the middle picture, where the Amazon plume, which is basically all the colors that you see here in yellow and green and red, very close to the coast. It stays close to the coast because that's when the currents that come, it's really the wind that pushes the water, pushes it against the coast and to the northwest. So the water flows with a very, very fast current that we call the North Brazil current along Brazil from the equator, right there where Bruna lives, more or less in the equator by Belém, all the way to the Caribbean along the coast. So for about 6 months, you have this current pushing the Amazon water along the coast all the way to the Caribbean. But on the second half of the year, from about July to December, something very strange happens, and you have something we call the intertropical convergence zone, and it moves north during the summer, and it creates a change in the surface currents of the ocean, and it allows the Amazon river plume to move offshore. And so that you can see that there's like a little loop. I'm going to try to see if my cursor shows it. This loop, we call this the retroflexion of the North Brazil current. That loop takes the Amazon water offshore, and it almost goes to Africa. So this pattern also breaks because this is a ring. These are rings that form here, and these rings break every 60 days. And so you have a ring that goes up the coast every 60 days. And that's very visible in the satellite data. So this is an important pattern. It happens every year. It's very regular. We can see it, and it's very interesting to see how the Amazon water moves offshore. So now, since about 2011, we've had a phenomenon in this part of the tropical Atlantic that has led to recurrent blooms of the sargassum. Sargassum is an alga. Many of the species of sargassum float because they have little air bubbles in little bladders, and so it's up near the surface, and the wind pushes them around just like anything that would be floating at the surface. But you see that since before 2011, we did not have sargassum blooms in the Central Atlantic Ocean, like between Brazil and Africa. But since 2011, we see that some years, like 2018, was extremely strong, but some years we didn't see anything, like in 2013. So the question is, why are we seeing this now, and why does this happen every year? And so what we did is a lot of people were involved in this study. We combined, this is a very complicated graphic. I'm showing several things here. This is the tropical Atlantic. In purple here, I have the Amazon plume. On the west side, on the east side, I'm sorry, and off of Africa, we have what we call the West Africa upwelling. So this is high nutrients, high phytoplankton due to upwelling, cold water coming from the bottom. This black line here is what we call the intertropical convergence zone. And we know where it is because we measured by strong winds or because there's a lot of clouds. And these colored pixels are the areas where we find sargassum. And this is kind of an average of all the years that we have seen. So one thing that I want you to start is looking at April down at the bottom left of the screen. We can see the intertropical convergence zone and where the sargassum bloom starts. And when we go to May, June, July, the intertropical convergence zone moves north. That's with the sun that's the position of the sun over the ocean. And that leads to all these clouds and strong winds. And the sargassum moves with it. So the sargassum is moving with the wind as it goes north. Then in September, the intertropical convergence zone starts moving to the south again. So in January, you'll have the intertropical convergence zone almost over the equator, a little bit south of the equator, but the sargassum stays behind. So what this story is telling us is that the sargassum is living off of nutrients that are caused by mixing of the very strong winds in the tropical Atlantic as it moves. So the winds push it to the west into the Caribbean. At that point, it does go into an area where the Amazon and the Orinoco River also put in nutrients, but the sargassum in the middle of the ocean is living from nutrients that are brought from below the surface, and it moves north and south depending on where the intertropical convergence zone is. And we can revisit this. I can zoom into some of these pictures if you want after I finish. So anyway, we're trying to look at questions of this scale, very big, along coastal zones, the impact of rivers on the ocean, or people on the ocean, as well as activities in the ocean, and climate change, as we try to understand how we sustain development. So this is a big issue as we have population growth and people want to have a good life. We need to move in a way that we develop, but we do it in a way that is also protecting the environment and our own lives, and not just go crazy exploiting the environment, because that would hurt everybody. So Marine Life 2030 is an effort to bring these technologies together, do it with stakeholders and users, and apply the knowledge that we gain to manage marine life better so that we can make it last for a long time. So anyway, please contact me. This is my email, carib@usf.edu, and I'll be happy to engage you in Marine Life 2030. Thank you.
We designed this conference to start with the importance of the inland waters and its impact in ocean. And you, with your fantastic presentation, you really show us how important the inland waters affect the ocean. And a lot of things were said, but I would like to highlight the importance of image. The image shows us in seconds the enormous impact. So thank you so much for that and for all your career on trying to observe. And I think Brazil is a very important moment. For the past 10 years, I've been working together with a lot of important organizations in Brazil to understand better the ocean, the rivers, the lakes. And one of them is Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso. And of course, the challenge that Sergio put us to do this annually or twice a year, I think it will flow, because in the south of Brazil, in Santa Catarina, also in centers in Rio de Janeiro, a lot of entities are working, and particular thanks to the whole academy in Brazil, because there are a lot of very important scientists there, but also the Brazilian Navy, which is doing a fantastic job for such an enormous water area, and particularly the state of Ceará, together with the Federação das Indústrias do Estado do Ceará, together with their academy and also together with their government, they are putting in place a kind of monitoring system to take important images from that area. So Frank, all this community of Brazil, I'm sure it will follow your challenge to send you an email to interact together with the United States and all of the great things you are doing. And it's now time to put Bruna in the arena, because she is in the field, she is in the water, she is in the coast. And as you said, Frank, the Amazons is very important. So let's learn with Bruna, that is in the field, what is going on there.
May I, before Bruna, sorry, before you start, Geraldo Medalha, who is one of the people who are attending to this meeting, he's asking several questions which I think are more directly linked to Frank's presentation. So can I present the Geraldo Medalha's questions before we move on?
Of course, Sérgio,
Okay.
go on.
If I understand them correctly, Geraldo, perdoe-me se não as entendi bem. He's an expert. First question is, are there systems to capture this solid waste that are drained to the oceans, or we are just in a sort of passive attitude towards this phenomenon? The other question that Geraldo asks, and I'm going to read it because it's about the causality of the Sargasso phenomenon, which is, looking at these charts, it's hard to understand what comes first. The attacks originating in physical, then chemical, and then biological conditions, or not? Frank, did you get what Geraldo wants to ask? Or
yeah, and Geraldo asked exactly the kinds of things that scientists are very busy trying to address. So in science, whenever you detect an anomaly, something strange that is different, then everybody pays attention. If everything is normal, then it's not that interesting to science. But that's an oversimplification. But we're really interested in big changes or when something is different from normal. So when we see that something like the Sargassum blooming in the middle of the ocean, this is hundreds of kilometers offshore, we wonder why. And so we try to put together data from winds, from buoys, from ships, try to put everything together. And so our present understanding, which is not perfect, is that in the middle of the ocean, far offshore, near the equator in the tropical Atlantic, the Sargassum aggregates together by wind. The winds are extremely strong, very, very strong. I mean, remember, these are the trade winds in which the hurricanes form, and so very strong winds. So in this area, this wind mixes the water very deep, and you get nutrients from deeper layers to the surface, and you have plenty of light. These plants are in a warm area. They love it. They're growing like crazy. When they get pushed close to the continent, so the trade winds blow from east to west. When they get close to the continent, to near Brazil, and they get into the Caribbean, then you also have the influence of rivers, but not in the middle of the ocean, where the nutrients by rivers are relatively low, but you have a lot of nutrients coming from below. So it's a very complicated story in which physics, chemistry, and biology are all completely intertwined. And it's not easy to say which comes first, because it depends on what time of the year you're looking at.
Silly final question from and it's my question. This overgrowth of the Sargasso, is it the signal that something is going wrong, or it can just be a sort of normal natural phenomenon?
It's the new normal.
And it's a bad new normal with regards to sustainability of marine life and human life, depending on the ocean.
Well, this is what we have to figure out, Sergio. There's things there are tipping points. So the Sargassum, we have the Sargasso Sea in the North Atlantic. So there's plenty of Sargassum in the North Atlantic, in the middle of the North Atlantic. There was an anomalous wind event that pushed it first to the east, then south, and it arrived in the tropics around 2009, 2010. We know that. We can measure these things. And yet that is an anomalous event. That anomalous event carried this population of living things south. Now it's established. Now it's a new normal. The Sargassum lives now in the tropics also. So this is happening with many species. Many species are moving from one place to the other because either temperature is changing, or the winds are changing, or because we carry them there, either because we want to, like there's many trees in Europe and in America that came from Africa, and vice versa, so we have introduced species everywhere on purpose and some not on purpose. So some of these are moving to new areas on their own as invasive species. So some of these are natural, quote unquote. Some of them are not so natural. And so the question is, as we move along, do we know what's happening, or are we clueless about what's happening in terms of how these species are moving? Because they affect us. This sargassum affects the economy of the Caribbean and of countries in Africa. Very big, millions of dollars in tourism lost. And so this is true for mangroves, this is true for fish, this is true for shellfish. As species move around, if we're not careful, our economies are going to be affected in ways that we don't understand. And so part of that we're trying to do is we better measure so that we know that's what's happening, and then make the right decisions. If we don't measure and we don't know what's happening, we cannot make the right decisions.
Very good explanation, Frank. Thank you so much. Bruna, desculpa, já te segurei demais aqui.
No, and just about that, Frank, actually, I've watched it with my eyes. I've run 5 offshore expedition through Amazon Atlantic portion, and we've measured these sargassos on the sea. And after that, I can feel at my skin as I was surfing along coastal Amazon. So for me, it's a big threat if we are also comprehend that we are living in the biggest mangroves area on the planet with the biggest artisanal fisheries. So it's a huge impact for the future. And I would like to make some questions for you, but I can do later if Miguel and Sergio could open the space for me. But I will, porque eu sou brasileira e vivo na Amazônia, eu vou pedir licença também para Frank e Bhakti para poder falar em português, já que a maioria da nossa audiência está em português, e também acho que com a minha fala eu posso fazer umas conexões com o que a Bhakti e o Frank falaram. Eu vou começar, então. Eu falo demais, viu? Qualquer coisa, Miguel, Sérgio, vocês me param.
Não se preocupe, avance.
O Miguel é terrível, ele corta de maneira brutal.
Pode cortar, Miguel, que eu falo mesmo. Mas olha só, eu queria muito agradecer ao convite, porque eu vejo realmente uma oportunidade de crescimento e de incentivo. Eu tenho 32 anos, nasci, cresci e vivo na Amazônia, e dedico na minha vida, mas dediquei 15 anos da minha vida, dedico ainda estando mais perto dos manguezais amazônicos, das áreas de manguezais. E a IUCN, que é a União Internacional de Conservação da Natureza, diz que até 35 anos eu sou considerada jovem, início de carreira, então a Fundação está ajudando uma jovem mulher na Amazônia, início de carreira, então eu realmente agradeço esse incentivo. Eu começo um pouco falando de mim, que eu acho importante contextualizar esse local de fala. A minha avó era pescadora, meu avô era pescador, eu me sinto muito conectada com as comunidades pesqueiras do norte do Brasil, e por conta de toda essa vivência com os pescadores, com os mestras de maré, apesar de ser oceanógrafa, hoje em dia eu gosto muito mais de falar que eu sou mangueóloga. E para quem está traduzindo para o Frank e para Bach, é algo como mangrovelogist, something like that. Então, e eu fico muito feliz que eu acho que finalmente a gente chegou no início de tudo, né? Porque, como a gente sabe, a vida começou nos oceanos. A vida começou nos oceanos e, como Bach e Frank falaram, a vida depende dos oceanos. E não é só a nossa vida, é a vida de todos os seres no planeta depende dos oceanos. E esse senso de conexão ao redor da vida é o que motiva essa década dos oceanos, na verdade. Esse senso de conexão, de que a gente faz parte de algo maior do que... Né, esse eixo de conexão, ele já vem sido dito, e aqui eu queria trazer um pouco Papa Francisco, que ele traz o conceito de nossa casa comum. Também tem o James Lovelock, que nos anos 70 ele trouxe a teoria de Gaia, e eu estou trazendo uma figura religiosa, um cientista, e ao mesmo tempo a gente tem comunidades que vêm dizendo isso há muito tempo. Como um exemplo maior, a gente tem a carta do chefe Seattle, endereçada, que hoje é muito usada pela ONU, que ele fala que tudo está conectado, e o que ocorre na Terra ocorre aos filhos da Terra. Além do chefe Seattle, James Lovelock, Papa Francisco, a gente tem Davi Kopenawa falando da queda do céu, e tantas outras lideranças de povos nativos falando que nós estamos conectados. E o que a BAC trouxe, o Frank trouxe, que eu trago, que tantos panelistas trazem no mundo inteiro, tantos relatórios falam, é que a vida está conectada e a vida depende dos oceanos. Esse sentimento de unidade, eu acho que ele é um dos grandes desafios que a gente tem que mover para essa década e tornar isso um conhecimento realmente normal, né, estabelecido na nossa sociedade. A gente faz parte de algo maior. E é esse sentimento, né, que move o mundo hoje para um sentimento de unidade. Hoje a gente fala de uma floresta, somos um oceano, somos um planeta, e como até o Bob Marley dizia, né, somos um amor. Esse sentimento de unidade, ele também conduz a gente a um sentimento de responsabilidade, que a gente precisa tomar ações efetivas. Como a BAC disse, nós somos parte do problema, então a gente precisa ser parte da solução. E aí entra a década dos oceanos. Também lembrando que a ONU, né, ela declarou, tem essa década dos oceanos, mas também a gente está na década de restauração dos ecossistemas. Então, na verdade, a gente fala que se a gente junta tudo isso, a gente está na década da vida. E falar da vida é uma missão que envolve todos os habitantes da Terra. E isso é muito importante. Falando um pouquinho mais sobre isso e trazendo uma perspectiva de desafios, né? A década dos oceanos é a década da ciência oceânica para o desenvolvimento sustentável. E a gente precisa ampliar o nosso olhar do que realmente é a ciência. A ciência, normalmente, a gente está habituado que ela nasce e se desenvolve nos muros, nas salas das universidades. No entanto, o conhecimento tradicional e o legado deixado por povos e comunidades nativas podem nos dar muita base, muito conhecimento, uma vez que esses povos e comunidades, né, tiveram suas vidas conectadas e viveram junto com o uso dos recursos naturais. E eu sei que tem um livro escrito pelo Jared Diamond, que é o Colapso, não sei se vocês já leram, mas esse livro ele fala de sociedades que colapsaram por não usar de forma adequada os recursos naturais, também por outras questões. Mas, de qualquer forma, o conhecimento tradicional das comunidades, ele é um conhecimento que é aliado com o conhecimento científico e utilizado com avanços tecnológicos, isso é uma ferramenta poderosa para a gente realmente acelerar as mudanças que a gente quer, que a gente precisa para o oceano que nós queremos. E acelerar mudanças é algo que a gente realmente precisa, né, nessa década. Acho que ela é uma década da aceleração. A gente realmente precisa tomar ações, e precisa tomar ações hoje. E unificar o conhecimento tradicional com o científico pode nos dar base para isso. Porque eu vejo muito que um outro muro que a gente tem que saltar é que a gente precisa muito confiar na natureza. Afinal, a vida se desenvolveu nesse planeta há 3,5 bilhões de anos. Nosso planeta é o planeta da vida. E eu acredito muito que a maioria das soluções que a gente quer encontrar já existem na natureza. Muito porque, como os próprios relatórios, né, o relatório de avaliação dos oceanos, o relatório do IPCC, muitos cientistas, muitas pesquisas, elas já mostram para a gente a causa desses danos. A gente sabe que a causa dos danos que o planeta enfrenta hoje está nos nossos hábitos de consumo. E a gente precisa mudar o coração e a mente das pessoas para uma mudança de atitude, que é o que a BAC falou aí quando ela traz o behavior change. São muitos desafios que requerem de um ator envolvido, que somos nós. Mas, de fato, a gente não consegue mais fazer isso sozinho. É preciso muito se unificar em grupos e coletivos que apoiem essa causa. E aqui eu vou entrar um pouquinho no contexto, né, da Amazônia, e aí eu conecto muito com o que Frank disse. Hoje eu vivo na área e eu cresci com esse paradoxo de viver numa das áreas mais importantes para o mundo. Eu cresci ouvindo que eu estou no pulmão do mundo, eu cresci ouvindo que aqui tem a maior fonte de água doce do mundo, eu cresci ouvindo que aqui tem o maior cinturão de manguezais do mundo, e porque a minha região ainda tem uma carência tão grande de investimentos sociais, econômicos, culturais, políticos e científicos. Então, essa discrepância, esse paradoxo que é enfrentado não só pela região amazônica, mas pelas regiões tropicais no mundo inteiro, a Índia, a Indonésia, né, toda essa linha tropical, são áreas do planeta que precisam de um olhar especial. São áreas de extrema densidade demográfica, e hoje a região amazônica, do litoral amazônico, né, os manguezais amazônicos, que é como eu gosto mais de referenciar onde eu estou, eu vivo nos manguezais amazônicos, é uma área hoje que representa a última fronteira de investimentos, de explorações ao longo da costa do Brasil. A maioria de quem está ouvindo aqui, eu tenho certeza que é do sul e sudeste do Brasil, do nordeste também, e vocês nas suas regiões já enfrentaram esse crescimento demográfico, que inclusive no relatório do relatório dos oceanos, né? O crescimento demográfico é uma das principais ameaças ao oceano, né? Trazendo com isso outros tipos de explorações também. Mas hoje a região amazônica ela é a última fronteira, tem atualmente a maior ameaça aos manguezais é o crescimento demográfico, isso a um prazo, a curto prazo, a médio prazo e a longo prazo a gente tem uma perspectiva de exploração de petróleo e gás, exatamente na área onde o Frank mostrou no gráfico para a gente. Então, é esse paradoxo de uma área que é importante, uma área onde ainda o olhar político-econômico está atrasado do que a gente precisa para os próximos anos. E aí eu tenho empenhado, eu e minha equipe e profissionais aqui no norte do Brasil, empenhado um esforço realmente muito grande em tentar, de fato, empoderar, fortalecer comunidades locais, grupos locais, para eles terem consciência de quais são os impactos humanos. Além disso, uma outra estratégia que a gente tem usado aqui é tentar formar uma rede de lideranças públicas comprometidas. Trazer esse comprometimento dos nossos líderes é importantíssimo para essa década. E, além disso, o que eu acredito muito é que a gente precisa investir realmente nosso esforço numa cultura oceânica. E nos anos que a gente vive hoje, né, especialmente no momento do planeta, da globalização que a gente vive hoje, a gente sabe que desinformação é uma ameaça. Então, possibilitar com que a informação chegue no coração e na mente das pessoas é uma missão que eu acredito que os nossos esforços deveriam estar alinhados para. Esforços de cientistas, esforços de ONGs, esforços de governo. A gente precisa fazer com que isso que a gente está falando chegue realmente a quem precisa, que é a sociedade em geral. E a cultura oceânica, ela pode dar ferramentas para a gente fazer isso. E nesse intuito, eu tenho estudado, né, na minha organização também bastante o uso da ciência comportamental e ciência social para aplicar mudanças de comportamento, que são as mudanças de atitude para as pessoas. Uma vez que se a gente faz o problema, a gente também é parte da solução. E eu acredito muito que a gente pode mudar trazendo isso. E uma perspectiva também de mudança que me dá esperança que eu lembro, quando eu era criança, o mundo estava vivendo a fase dos 3 R's. A gente falava muito de reusar, reduzir e reciclar. E eu venho acompanhado na minha vida que a gente tem aumentado os R's. Agora a gente fala de recriar, repensar, reconectar, reparar. E hoje, a nossa década é uma década que ela é de um R. Ela é o R do regenerar. E tanto a década dos oceanos quanto a década de restauração de ecossistemas, que para mim é a década da vida, é um momento crucial de alinhamento de esforços, alinhamento de conhecimento científico e tradicional para a gente restaurar pessoas, regenerar pessoas, regenerar ecossistemas e assim regenerar o planeta. Eu queria falar mais coisas.
Muito obrigado, Bruna. Se calhar ainda teremos alguma oportunidade mais, mas eu queria, antes de mais, saudar a importantíssima intervenção e dizer que a Bruna foi convidada para motivar, certamente, para motivar o norte do Brasil, mas também por mérito próprio, muito mérito próprio, com muita qualidade, trabalho já feito, e é nesse contexto que iremos ainda aprender ainda mais consigo. Now in English, every one of you spoke.
Sorry.
Yes?
No. I just want to ask a question to Bruna, but you can go ahead and then I'll do it.
Okay. No, I was just saying that there is a common message for every one of the speakers, which is there is the need to interact in terms of the natural sciences together with social science. We've heard words like change, motivation, and the impact of our being, of our humanity in the water. So, and I would like, I don't know if you want to do the question, Sergio, but what I would like, and it is a question for all of the panelists and you, because you are a fantastic man of the social sciences. How can we motivate people without clashing, without too much tension? Because we are here to help all of us. So that is the main question, because if we do not find the common ground to act together without clashing, it will be much harder.
My question is the following, and I'll do it in Portuguese since it is a question to Bruna. Bruna, se você tivesse que em linha com esta ideia de motivar, se eu perguntasse para você, como é que você explica para o cidadão comum a importância de conservação e restauração dos mangues? Porque na percepção comum, o mangue é um lugar pútrido, é um lugar que se deve evitar, é um lugar que é normalmente associado com uma condição insalubre. Pelo menos essa é a percepção do leigo, a percepção média. Como é que você muda essa percepção? Né? Como é que isso... Mas assim, para o cidadão comum, não para o cientista.
Vamos separar, então, que tem o cidadão comum, que são cidadãos que dependem dos manguezais. Eles já sabem da importância desse ambiente, né? Os pescadores, pescadoras, marisqueiros, marisqueiras. A vida deles depende desse ambiente. Então, o que eu tenho feito muito nessas áreas é a gente falar de como a gente pode cuidar da vida. Eu uso muito a palavra vida, eu acho que a vida ela conecta, e para os cidadãos que estão distantes dessa área, que foi a dificuldade que a BAC trouxe também, que são os cidadãos urbanos, né? O urbano, ele está tão distante da natureza que ele não consegue se ver parte dela. E essa reconexão que é necessária. E para esse cidadão urbano, eu tento fazer uma conexão. O que é um mangue? O mangue é o berçário da vida, o mangue é uma maternidade. Maternidade, todo mundo entende essa palavra. A maternidade, ela conecta a gente porque ela tem um senso de mãe, um senso de cuidado. Então, através de algumas palavras que conectam o senso comum, a gente pode provocar mudança de comportamento, porque eu acredito na mudança de comportamento partindo realmente do coração, embora há estratégias de psicologia comportamental que fazem a mudança por outros meios, né? Incentivos econômicos, incentivos materiais e tudo mais. Mas é uma mudança mais lenta, né? Ela tá sendo feita no mundo há muito tempo. Só que a gente precisa de mais pessoas envolvidas nessa mudança, que é realmente de trazer essa fala. Essas mudanças, elas ocorrem em momentos muito sutis, na verdade. Desculpa trazer só mais 30 segundos. Recentemente, a gente empenhou uma campanha aqui para falar da importância da mulher nos manguezais amazônicos. E a gente chamou essa campanha de Mães do Mangue, porque o mangue também é mãe. Então, assim, né, toda uma ciência, um estudo para a gente poder alcançar as pessoas. Mas, de fato, Sérgio, isso é muito triste, né? Porque os manguezais, ao mesmo tempo, hoje, eles são os principais reguladores do clima, junto com os oceanos, né, nas áreas costeiras, e a população que realmente... E aí alguém perguntou no chat, o que ataca? O que ataca a Amazônia hoje? O que ataca a Amazônia hoje vem atacando ela há muito tempo, né? E aí eu trazendo aqui o Boaventura da Silva Santos, quando ele fala de epistemologias do Sul, é tudo isso que está atacando a Amazônia há muito tempo. Então, trazer para o meio, desurbanizar, mesmo quem está nas cidades, é uma tarefa necessária. O urbano hoje, e aí eu trago de novo o relatório, eu aconselho muito quem não lê o relatório, pelo menos ver o vídeo de resumo dele, porque o crescimento demográfico que vem junto com todo esse padrão de consumo desnecessário que a gente coloca na natureza é o que tem conduzido muito desses impactos. Eu acho que a BAC está aqui balançando a cabeça, porque ela...
Yes.
I want to give the word to Bhakti.
Can I add? Yes, I resonate so much with Bruno when she said that, you know, the change has to come from the heart. And so what we do at our NGO, we have this program where we mentor the young people to take local water action. And in that, one of the first things we make them reflect is the mindset that has brought us to this situation. So help them understand critically, view the situation that we are in today. And so what we call as that module that we do is called resetting of hearts is the first step that we do. And we do that by helping them critically think. So for example, we demonstrate to them through critical thinking exercises that our current decision making is very much driven by an extractive mindset, that it is for us, it's all me. It's me human is the center of the universe, and I want to protect myself because I'm insecure and I need everything from me. And that is an extractive mindset. And once we recognize that, we know that that is what has led to the situation that we are in today. So what is needed is an alternative mindset of healing, because it is not for me. If I include everyone, if I say the purpose is about protecting the ecosystem, then some students say, what if we are left out? What if I look after myself first and then look after the nature? So it helps us to understand what is driving their thinking, and we help them to, deconstruct how they're thinking right now and help them to rethink that no, because our life depends on the ecosystem, let us expand our purpose rather than make it for human. If we make it ecocentric decision making, then humans will be covered because our life depends on the ecosystem. And that way we are helping them to understand what we have done and therefore what we need to do. So that thinking has to, it has to be provoked. We provoke that thinking. So that is one. Secondly, we are undertaking a research in creating a new model, because right now everything around, every system of the world is geared to serve the economy. So we are serving the economy. Oh my Lord, economy, and if the Lord of economy approves, then I shall do it. I have to, bow down to the Lord of economy and convince the Lord of economy, imaginary Lord, that ecosystem is good for me because it makes you money. But what if we turned everything around and we say, no, let us make ecosystem, let us make economy subservient to economy. What does that mean? What it means is, what if we said that any activity, any economic activity must demonstrate that it maximizes the ecosystem services, not does minimum harm? Because right now what we do is we are serving the economy and saying we shall do, economy is allowed to do minimum harm. But what if we turn everything around and say, let the economy prove, economy be on the back foot to say, if I want to develop a city, how am I going to improve the ecosystem, enhance and maximize the ecosystem? What kind of solutions will emerge from that? And we want to demonstrate that that is how it should be. If we've got everything topsy-turvy and we are bending our backwards to prove to the economy that why it is so important. Whereas it should be the other way around. The economy has to prove how is it maximizing the ecosystem, because even the economy has collapsed. Even the economy has collapsed. Even then we have made economy the Lord. And that has to change. We have to change that. Otherwise, if we do not change at the fundamental level, and it is possible. It is possible because we are humans, we are creative. If we set our mind, if we set our intention, we have made mistake. And if we reflect and say, oh, that was a mistake. Now let's turn it around and decide. For example, if I say that I want to create a water management system that is going to be maximizing the ecosystem services. So what I will be doing is I will be growing food, fiber. I will be making sure that in the city, I'm growing all these things, not just managing for floods, through artificial means, but I will introduce wetlands. I will introduce this so that I'm getting the outcome, because I have been given an objective that I must maximize the ecosystem services, because I'm damaging it. I have to offset it by making it more, not minimum harm. I have to maximize. So this is a research we are doing by showing case study. If we apply that thinking to a development, what solutions will emerge? And what if everyone did it? Is it because if we said every economic activity must prove and make sure it is leading to economic, then economic activity is also surviving. We don't have to worry. But unless we turn things around, it cannot change. So this is something quite radical, but at the same time, very much needed.
Thank you, Bhakti. I knew that
has
after
raised-
Bruna has spoken, you would submerged like a volcano. Thank you so much.
But Frank has raised his hand. I think
Yeah,
he
yeah.
wants to
So-
add something to the discussion.
Of course, Frank.
Well, I'm going back to the question that you posed to Bruna on in terms of concrete examples that you can give to people to understand the benefits of mangroves. So one thing to understand is mangroves don't live everywhere. They're really tropical species along coastlines. And so they live in a very narrow part of the world, very narrow coastal zone, very narrow latitudinal area. And so they're very unique. And even there, we see that they have several benefits. You know? So they if you have mangroves, it protects your coast because it solidifies the sediment, so you at least minimize erosion from storms, waves, and so on. Many species of fish either have babies and grow in mangroves or live their whole lives in mangroves, and this is the sources of a huge fishery. So it supports people from food. You find oysters, you have many species that are fished for either sustainable living along coastlines or commercially. You also have what is now a big topic in terms of carbon sequestration, which I agree with you, Bhakti, is being put forward as an economic model to try to deal with climate change. But it is true, people are looking at mangroves as an area where you have a lot of carbon sequestration. So if you have mangroves, if your country has mangroves, if your county has mangroves, people are trying to count how many tons of carbon does my mangrove support. So that's an important economic value. And we also have to look at it from a recreational point of view or a cultural point of view. Mangroves are beautiful, and you can support tourism industry, or you just enjoy it yourself. So there's many benefits for mangroves.
But one just to follow up on that, Frank, the importance of mangroves are it's sort of limited, confined to the locals where they are, or they go beyond. The importance goes beyond that. It has mangroves have a systemic importance that goes beyond the local boundaries where they are located.
Well, that's important almost for everything. Everything has first a local impact, and so it is in your interest as somebody that lives in an area to protect it, because it is part of your environment. So first, yes, local. Second is this business of carbon sequestration and food production. It has a bigger regional impact. Ultimately, it is an area that we don't know the global importance yet in terms of biodiversity. If we mismanage mangroves and allow the continuous cutting of mangroves or the continuous pollution of mangrove areas and basically allow the mangroves to disappear, then we will potentially lose a number of medicines, materials, everything that we can tie to mangroves in terms of ecosystem service. So I agree with you, Bhakti. There is an economic incentive to protect, but if we don't talk in terms of the economy and why this is valuable, people are not going to react. So I agree with you that we should automatically think that we should protect the environment just because the environment, but it's not the way that people work. People don't work that way.
Yes, but we're just trying to alternatively challenge on the side and demonstrate, how it can be turned around. But I agree, because it's a very large system embedded. I also want to point out the benefits of mangrove. Very evident was in the south of India when they had the tsunami. They had a big tsunami a few years ago, and it actually affected those lands worse because there were areas of mangrove that did not get affected, and the ones that where mangroves were removed were the ones that were damaged. And that's ample proof that I will share a short video clip, offline, which shows that area which was protected with mangrove. And it's a climate regulator. It's a natural climate regulator. We don't need to spoil the climate and then go look around hunting for a solution and then prove the economic value of it. First you destroy, you destroy it and then find a solution and then ask us to prove how it will help you. So it's like everything is, the world is topsy-turvy, it's a madhouse.
Bruna wants to say something.
I would like to say something regarding... eu vou dizer Ai, agora fiquei confusa. Minha cabeça virou aqui. Mas a gente falando de economia, talvez, né, que o grande fórum ele está dentro também dessa perspectiva de economia azul. E talvez não seja aqui, mas para quem está aqui, poder também acompanhar os discursos, né, da COP, é preciso a gente resgatar a origem da palavra economia. No fundo, a economia ela vem do grego oikos, que significa casa. Né? O sentido da economia é o cuidado com a casa. A nossa economia ela só pode prosperar se ela realmente... O grego, né, o sentido original do que é economia. Ela não é para muitos lucrarem em cima de tudo. Então, resgatar isso, trazer realmente essa origem é algo que atravessa as ciências como um todo. Hoje esse sentido deturpado da economia tem atravessado todos os campos, né, sociais, culturais, ambientais. Isso é um ponto. O outro ponto que eu queria trazer era, já que a gente está conectando aqui com os manguezais, aproveitar o Frank também, que eu fiquei... Aí seria uma question aqui para o Frank, que aqui, hoje, nos manguezais amazônicos, 18 mil famílias dependem dos manguezais para o seu sustento. 18 mil famílias é quase 80 mil pessoas dependem dos manguezais. Elas estão diariamente pescando, diariamente exercendo alguma atividade produtiva nesse ecossistema. E eu queria perguntar para o Frank, né, trazendo uma perspectiva de uma região que tem pouco investimento, e também porque é muito difícil os próprios cientistas daqui terem essa coleta, né, de dados contínua, entendendo que a gente consegue mudar. Talvez aqui a gente consegue mudar os nossos corações, mas a gente precisa mudar as mentes. E, às vezes, para mudar a mente, a gente precisa de dados. A gente precisa gerar informação, monitorar a informação e comunicar essa informação. Frank, me ajuda. Qual forma você acha que a gente pode gerar dados nos manguezais amazônicos, tendo 18 mil famílias que hoje eu vejo que eles são these families are the guardians of our mangroves here. How we can actually improve them as a feeling of responsibility? Do you think that we can encourage them to make them a small scientific and they can do their own research and we can use their data and together we can really show the importance of this area for the people who think in dollars?
Yeah, Bruno, I think you asked one of the most fundamental questions that we have in front of us, because as many people, as you know, because you live there, many people don't have healthy lives. They have a very low income. So their first priority is just to survive. And so if there's no immediate benefit to them in collecting a measurement, they will not do it. Their first priority is to put a roof over their head and to feed themselves and their families. And as you know, there's a lot of social problems in these areas. So I think it will take investment and planning and how you bring the quality of life of these people up a little bit to the point where they can survive and be comfortable in contributing to science. If you don't do that, there's no way that people will contribute to science, because they need to take care of their first basic needs. So and this is a very difficult question, because in Venezuela, where I grew up, it's the same thing. Many families live in mangrove areas, and they use a mangrove as a trash dump. They don't have bathrooms. They don't have running water. They just dump everything into the mangrove. And so how do you bring people out of that situation so that they can contribute to other, what we may consider science, or or better living for a larger group of people? That is a very difficult question, and it doesn't have an easy answer. It will take foundations like this foundation or other foundations. It will take governments to wake up and do the right thing, which, as we all know, is not easy. So it's not an easy answer.
Thank you, Frank, so much. Sergio, I don't know if you have questions from the audience or if I can put question or give a comment.
No, I think actually, I think we are approaching the end of our conversation. No questions from the audience left. You may, you either may conclude the conversation, or there is enough time for another round of Q&A among ourselves.
Yeah, I think we are preparing because, as we said in the beginning, there will be COP nearby in October 30. COP in Glasgow will start. So, and we are also with this event preparing, warming up. And as I was expecting, bringing to the table Frank, Bhakti, and Bruna, it's a thing that immediately come to direct comments, conversations. So, and this is the kind of energy we would like to boost for COP. Of course, again, as I said, and now I am speaking as an economist, I hope I'm not offending anyone. Yes, I am an economist. And I think ecology and economy all start with three letters, eco. So it's a common ground to start. And of course, there will be a lot of tension. We are ending, or hope we are ending an EMEA process. All societies after that are in tension. Of course, we are doing wrong things to the world, and we must understand that and change that. But we will not be able to change that without making a fusion in between all sciences. In my opinion, and when the UN invited me to say a word after 20 years of observing behaviors, and the behaviors that were told today, it is the same behaviors all over the world. Yes, the world turned their back to the water or to the ocean. Yes, that comes because of cultural changes, the urban and the not urban people. But again, the urban people will increase. I have no doubts about that. We will try to think on changing the urban. What is the urban? I think it is possible to change the urban without changing people to be urban people, because much of innovation comes from getting together people. Of course, IT is fundamental, and that is a change. But again, the word urban, and I'm saying urban not in the sense of this strange megalopolis that I don't consider that urban, so I consider that cement and a little bit more of that. So the concept must change, and of course with scientists like Bhakti, like Bruna, it is possible to create the new urban model, and that's the social that we need to think of. And of course, Frank brings us today to the table the fundamental importance of observing with image, with sensors, because what we are tackling here is something that our normal eye and our sense cannot solve. We need help of mechanisms. We need help of satellites, because we are growing as human. And that is not to change, because we want to live more time. We want to that our kids have better lives, and that means they will kind of consume. But we can change consumption from extracting. There is biotechnology there to help, and no one is doing enough on that side. So we must invest, put money on that, to try to solve the equation of the growing people. But as Bruna said, the best guardians of our ecosystems and even our urban life are the communities that live on there. And identity, I think, is the final question. So, and Sergio, I leave this to you. But I also will ask for a final comment of every one of you. What can we expect from next COP? What can we do that next COP is a success? And then a final question for Sergio, because he's an urban man that knows about sociology and history. Can we really change the urban model towards a more sustainable model without imploding that model? That is the question to you, Sergio. And you cannot speak, and if you don't want, you don't speak now. This can be another talk for the next 6 months or so. So maybe starting by Bhakti, then Frank and Bruna for what can we expect from COP, and how can we do better to succeed on COP?
I would say that we should try our best to influence the COP by offering some paper, maybe, I'm not sure, something we can come up with. But to be really honest, I feel unless we are doing something different, that something different meaning that the mindset that created the problem, unless we tackle that, unless we tackle the things at the mindset level, which means we may also need to change the model or at least start to look at alternative models, we are not going to change this, because the problem has been, the root cause has to be addressed. The root cause is putting environment subservient to economy is the major problem. That is my conviction. And I also believe that, it's okay that, as humans, we are creative. If we set our mind to a new objective, we will create new solutions. It is not impossible, because there are people who are actually operating in that way in their own little microcosm, and they're doing fine. They are examples. So that is what I would like to put forth to COP and, see if we can influence them.
Thank you so much, Bhakti, for everything. And I know that it's late there in India, and thank you so much for being today with us. So, Frank, your last comment.
I'll make a little bit of a more general comment. I think that it's not clear to me what COP will accomplish without the support of the general public. So politicians will get engaged in COP, but politicians respond to lots of people. So if lots and lots of people in any one area push them, they will do something. But as long as Bhakti said, if that doesn't happen, then it will be business as usual. So that's one. The second is, we know things are changing, but we don't really know exactly how it's affecting life. And so from my point of view, I invite countries like Brazil that have a tremendous human capacity to build technology and to do it relatively inexpensively, to develop and engage with the world in the whole aerospace industry that you have, the other industries that you have that use that knowledge to help measure change in a way that is affordable and that can be done everywhere. Once, if you measure change, you can do something. It's the same as going to the doctor. If you know what's happening to you, the doctor can do something.
Now, Bruna, to you, last comment.
Você me fez pensar que talvez hoje os ecologistas deviam estudar economia, os economistas deviam estudar ecologia, e assim a gente integra finalmente o eco. Mas, Miguel, se o meio urbano tem que mudar, na verdade, eu acho que a pandemia foi esse grande sinal que a gente precisa de mudanças. Isso é um momento que talvez passou da reflexão e agora é da ação. Se reconectar com a natureza seria mandatório para todos nós. Buscar ao máximo reconectar com as nossas raízes, né? Buscar, e não está muito longe. Se a gente buscar a nossa bisavó, ela cozinhava sem usar leite condensado. Né? Se a gente buscar ali na nossa raiz, da nossa memória, a gente consegue resgatar práticas que nos conectam com a natureza. E isso não está muito longe. Pelo menos da minha geração, eu consigo me conectar com a minha avó. A minha mãe, ela já quebrou, né? Então, se conectar com a natureza seria essa primeira ação. E aí, através de mudanças individuais, se conectar com grupos locais. E sempre pressionar os nossos líderes. Sempre. Eu acho que esse é estar atento e consciente a quem a gente elege, a quem nos representa, especialmente os países que vivem democracias com base na representativa. Então, é o meu último comentário.
Thank you so much, Bruna. And keep there guarding the Amazons. And thank you so much for being with us today. And of course, we are continue to be connected because now we are a team. Frank,
Yes.
Bhakti, and Bruna, and Sergio too. So
Great to
Sergio,
meet you.
Sergio, the last question. I don't know if you want
It's
to
not
answer.
a question, it's just a final remark. I completely agree with Bhakti and Bruna that we have to change our mindset. But I don't want to underplay the importance of science, of generating data, of generating images that are absolutely necessary to persuade the powers that be in the business sector and in government that their propositions might be self-defeating, right? Because otherwise, and I know these people, I've been in government for many years. Politicians respond to political cycles. Business people naturally respond to business cycle. Their normal framework, time framework is shorter than the framework, and that's reality. And we need science to prove that we are moving in an unsustainable way, and that might be contrary to their own very legitimate interests, right? Because otherwise, I'm afraid that as much in spite of the fact that we might be committed to at the community level and at the philosophical level, we need to change the incentives for the powers that be to adapt to a new course of development. This is my final remark. And thank you so much for the three of you and for Miguel also for this very interesting conversation. And I hope to do it again in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Really
thank you.
enjoyed this.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good to meet you all.